Welcome to your program, Power and Counsel with Pastor Sammy. Today's program comes with a very serious topic, a topic that we all have, in one way or the other, had to wonder whenever we see a movie or hear about a story, whether it's true or not. As a matter of fact, sometimes one of the most intriguing things is when we think about kids and we think about children, we think about sheer innocence. Nothing can go wrong. They could have nothing wrong with them. As a matter of fact, probably if you're thinking more from the evangelical point of view, you also start thinking kids are just born innocent. But in reality, in some other camps of Christianity, they don't see that kids are born innocent. They think that there's a need for intervention because kids are born into what's called original sin. So the question for today is, can children be demonically possessed? Now, that's a very big question. It is such a serious question that deserves a very valid, serious response. And for that, I am honored to bring to you probably the world expert in regards to exorcism and spiritual warfare. I'm talking about Dr. Bob Larson. He will be joining us very shortly to be able to answer that question, as well as his wife, Laura Larson. I would like to read to you a scripture in particularly that deals with this incident. The Bible reads as follows: "And when he came to the disciples, he saw a great multitude around them and scribes disputing with them. Immediately when they saw him, all the people were greatly amazed and running to him, greeted him. And he asked the scribes, 'What are you discussing with them?' Then one of the crowd answered and said, 'Teacher, I brought you my son who was mute, who has a mute spirit, and wherever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth. He gnashes his teeth and becomes rigid. So I spoke to your disciples, and that they should cast it out, but they could not.' And he answered him, 'O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me.' Then they brought him to him. And when he saw him, immediately the spirit convulsed him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed foaming at the mouth." Now, this is what the scripture continues to say. So, verse 21, he asked his father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. And he often has thrown him both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Jesus said to him, "If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes." Verse 24, immediately the father of the child cried out and said in tears, "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief." When Jesus saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "Deaf and dumb spirit, I command you, come out of him and enter him no more." Then the spirit cried out, convulsed him greatly, and came out of him. And he became as one dead, so that many said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had come into the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast it out?" And he said, get this is very important. So Jesus said, verse 29, "This kind can come out only out by nothing but prayer and fasting." So, what are we to do from this? Some people argue, the Bible is stating the story because the child is no more. He used to be a child, but it's a teenager or a young adult. So then why does the Bible call him a child? And why does the father tell Jesus this has been happening? Let's just say he is a teen, has been happening since he was a child. Well, it's going to be great. We have the answer for you today, as Dr. Bob Larson is going to be joining us very, very soon. Listen, before we bring them in, I do want to tell you that you are able to, if you can, check out Bob Larson's ministry. You can go to his website on www.boblarson.org. That's BOBLARSON.org. You can also find them on Facebook at Bob Larson, YouTube on Bob Larson Exorcism or The Real Exorcist, and Twitter at Bob Larson Exorcist. You can also call if you would like personal ministry from him or his team at 303-980-1511, or send the ministry an email at bob@boblarson.org if you would like to invite him to your area or have a conference or a detailed teaching for you and your Bible school. Listen, we are very excited about him coming in to be a guest, including with his lovely wife, Laura Larson. But we do have many people that come and visit us here every time and they chime in. And so we thank you. We want to thank our new subscribers. We want to send a shout out to Michael Burton, who also subscribed. Sammy on she is a waitress from On the Grill restaurant, and Mary Charner and Robert Kandu. I hope I didn't misspell or mispronounce your last name. And also Oscar Padilla, who is a volunteer at the police department of his city. Thank you so much for subscribing. And again, how can you be part of this team? We ask you kindly, if we can count on you, to click on the subscribe button. That's right, click on the subscribe button. If you're hearing us on Spotify podcasts, if you're also hearing us on rumble.com or YouTube, we ask you, we want to count on you to click on subscribe on all of those three formats, and click on the subscribe and click on the follow button. Thank you so much for doing so. Welcome to the program, Power and Counsel, Pastor Bob and Laura. It is an honor to have you here. Please say hi to the audience.
Hello, folks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Pastor Sammy, and your dear wife. Thank you, Christina.
And we glorify God for having you here today. The enemy's been busy trying to stop us from having you here, but we are here and the victory belongs to the Lord. So let me just get to the question real quickly, Pastor. Can children be demonically possessed?
The short answer to that is yes, but it needs a bit of an explanation. They're not possessed because they make a decision to open the door to the devil, because a child doesn't have the cognitive capacity nor the moral ability to weigh the consequences of their actions and therefore choose to open up a door to Satan. So the door has to be opened by somebody else. And in most cases, that door is opened by the ancestors.
And when you mean that the ancestors are the ones that open the door, what do you mean by that? Like, does that mean that they did something, or how does it come to effect that the child gets possessed?
Well, the biblical principle of Deuteronomy 28 is that successive generations are affected by the sins of one particular generation. And we find that it says under the third and fourth generation in the Decalogue, but it also indicates in other places generational curses are perpetuated. And we know that this is a reality because the Bible tells us in the Revelation there comes a time in which there will be no more curse. So obviously curses are operational. And curses have to have a link to pass on. That link is genetic. It is through the bloodline. So if a child has a demon, that demon has come through the bloodline. At times we will have demons say to us during a session of exorcism and deliverance, I entered into them in the womb, or I had them when they were born or before they were born. So the possibility of prenatal possession is confirmed by demons, and we know that's true because we then have to battle those demons and break the curses that allowed them to enter.
And you know what is it that anyone can do if they think that their child is demonically possessed? Considering that we want to make sure that the audience, of course, we asked them if they're able to contact you. We gave them the information to contact you. But right off the bat, what can a parent do if they feel that their child is demonically possessed uh, in a way that is not traumatizing to a child, but that it is health, that there's a healthy outcome without any psychological or spiritual damage to the child?
Well, of course, that's the issue. And there have been some recent cases. There was one, I believe, in California, where a child was actually strangled and beaten to death by some ill-meaning people. I'm sure they thought they were sincere, who were doing an exorcism on the child. So you can't beat the devil out. That doesn't work on an adult or a child. That's injurious and it's wrong and opens the door to more demons. So what you do is you have to determine what the age of the child is and what their level of emotional and spiritual understanding is in terms of how you approach them. And that's really the caution here. You want to comment on that, Laura?
Well, I think it's so important to really talk to people who are very experienced when it comes to children. And it's not just a husband and a wife saying, hey, I think our child is being disobedient, so let's cast the devil out of him or her. And that's so dangerous. And I just think just very, very careful and cautious wording, even talking around the child about something like this. You don't want to scare them or intimidate them or even plant something that really isn't true. Disobedience is very different than being demonized. And I just think people have to be beyond cautious. This is a very, very sensitive and very cautious area to enter into.
I think we need to add to that, there are other issues. There might be ADHD, might be autism. There could be various spectrum disorders, mental health issues. There could be neurological problems that a child is suffering from. So before anybody jumps to the conclusion a child has a demon and they try to do something to cast it out, they need to seek medical attention first and see what else is going on, perhaps psychological attention, and eliminate all other factors. Now, you could eliminate those factors and it still not be a demon. There could still be something going on in the mind that we don't understand. I think, though, what we're seeing now in our generation is a lot of babies, drug babies. You know, we used to have a lot of crack babies. Now we're having other types of babies who come out drug addicted, and a lot of, as we know, adult addictive behavior resembles demonic possession. So it is with the child. So, you know, there may be what appears to be anger, constant crying, uncontrollable outbursts, and you can't either inflict pain or an exorcism and solve that problem. So there needs to be a cautious procedure, and I can talk in a moment about some of the things you can do to determine whether or not it's actually a possession. Laura?
Well, I just think, some children have Tourette's, and so unexpected things come out of their mouths and they can shake.
And there are just so many things that can be misinterpreted as demons. And I think parents have to be so cautious because they don't want to say to a child, well, you have a demon or you're demonized. That can be very traumatic to a child and frightening. And so this, again, I speak about caution in this area. You just can't be cautious enough, and you have to have very skilled and very anointed people helping you, and you really have to refer a child out, with your being there, to an authority. And
I think what comes to my mind is, especially when you go to the doctor, you talk to your primary doctor or a primary physician, and you ask them, there's certain things and limitations that he or she is able to have in their office because of the equipment or even the experience of working with them. They could have the know-how, but maybe not the full experience. And I think when it comes to working with children, you really have to make time to, this is your child. You have to be careful and go to someone that has, like a primary doctor would probably give you to a specialist, that that pastors really are, if they don't have that experience, to seek consultation or send the child to someone who does have that experience and does have that expertise under their belt, because you don't want to go wrong.
No.
The child that you were talking about in California, and I read up with it, and she actually, they named her Aurelie Doe, and she went over 20 hours of torture. And they kept, she died of asphyxiation because they kept on trying to make her throw up. And the church that they were taking her, it's kind of like I guess you would call it a mom and pop type of a church, where
Exactly.
there's no specialization, there's no training. I guess I believe they were told that a prophet and an apostle told them they can go ahead and start ministry, and unfortunately it led to this tragic death because they asphyxiated this little baby. And so, Dr. Bob, if we have to be careful, and we have to be careful, like you said, Laura, about how to even mention this. So what if there is a demonic possession? What do we do then?
Well, let's talk about several factors. First of all, the age of the child. What are we talking about here? Well, if it's pre-verbal, then you have no ability to ask the child questions about what they may be seeing, hearing, or experiencing. Now, if the child is verbal, usually when parents come to me thinking a child has a demon, the child has been talking about bad nightmares, maybe seeing things in their room. Now, children sometimes have imaginary playmates, but sometimes those imaginary playmates are demons. So there needs to be some carefully coordinated questions about what the child is experiencing to determine if it's just childhood fantasy, imagination, or if something's going on. The key there is what's in the family, what's in the parents, and what is the background. So let's say, for example, a child is relating experiences like this, but that the father or the mother, as a case in point, has a family member who's involved in witchcraft or Santeria or something. Well, now I'm a little more suspicious that what the child's experiencing might be demonic. But again, still not prepared to actually do an exorcism. I might give you a case in point in a moment. Go ahead and comment further, Laura, and then I'll do that.
Well, I really appreciate when people bring a child or just someone usually in there.
Usually it's a teen. They'll bring the child in and they'll say, "Here, Pastor Bob, help this child." And he always says, "Let's talk first about the family." Because typically a parent needs to get set free first if there's an issue. And so I like that he takes them through that. And he also insists that they submit to spiritual questioning as well. And not just, well, this child, take care of this child. Well, why is the child the way they are? What are the issues surrounding that child's problems? And sometimes it's the parents, even really great parents, who are causing the problems. And so I think getting to the root of it is not the symptoms, not just, oh, take care of the child, get this uncomfortable behavior taken care of. It's really get to the root. Why is there a problem? What's wrong with the family? Tracing back in the family line what some of the problems might be.
Let me give you a case in point. Some time ago, I had a father bring a child to me. I'm gonna guess the child was about 8 to 10, somewhere along in there. And he said, my child has demons. And so I took my typically cautious approach, and I'm asking him all these questions from a medical standpoint, psychological standpoint. And I said, are you really sure he has demons? He says, yes, I'm a pediatrician.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
okay. I'm his father, but I also happen to be a pediatrician. So yes, I know childhood behavior and I know what to discount. So I began to work with this child. And anytime I work with children, I always get down on a knee or somehow position myself at eye level. So I'm not talking down to the child. I try to come down to their level. And if they're saying they're dreaming or seeing things about scary monsters, well, tell me about that scary monster.
Mm.
You know, what does it say? What does it do? Does it make you feel bad? Try to, and I did that with this child and I tested these feelings. And then, you know, when a child actually has a demon and the demon comes forth, it's not like with an adult. You know, people who have watched my YouTube channel see some pretty violent and sometimes very demonstrative exorcisms. It's not like that with a child. There's a basic rule in ministry and deliverance that's so important to know that we teach in our International School of Exorcism, and that is that demons, when they get in a person, psychoneurologically are limited to expressing behavior, presence, and mental capacitation equivalent to the host person. All right. So, educated person, educated demons. They're working through a more highly trained mind. Less educated person, generally less educated demons because they can't go beyond the mental and intellectual capacity of the person. All right, so apply this to a child. A demon, if it's in a child, is going to be limited by the cognitive ability, the emotional capacity of expression, and the intellectual level of the child. So it's going to express itself very differently. It's not going to come at you screaming and yelling and, you know, fingernails bare to claw your eyes out. It may be a little bit extreporous or difficult or stubborn or whatever. And it's going to speak in the language of a child. So it's, again, limited by the mental capacity of the child.
And
Yes, one time I did see experience ministering to a young boy, of course, with the parents and
And that's important too, by the way.
only with the parents. And so he just was very gentle. He didn't say, you have a demon. He just started talking to the young man, and the little boy started barking. And the demon was expressing itself in a barking way. He would
oh,
just
wow.
start barking. And so I think it was the mother and the grandmother were saying, well, this is unusual behavior. And so he was checking with everyone. Have you seen this behavior before? Has he talked about the dog? Has he not just, he just doesn't run in and say, wait, it's a dog demon and I'm going to get it. It's just so careful. And just to even say the word demon, I don't think he even uses the term demon, so that the children are not afraid and they don't feel labeled as having a demon. I mean, that's just very traumatic. So just he's very careful as he walks in.
Mm.
These
You know
situations.
what I was thinking about when I did my studies for my master's degree. My professor, I was blessed to have a professor that was a charismatic Christian, and he was also a psychologist. And he worked a lot in the cancer, actually one of the cancer hospitals there in Dallas, Texas. And he's one of the very first ones that, and he already went to be with the Lord, but he's one of the very first ones that worked with multiple personality disorders. Of course, now we call that dissociative identity disorder. And he shared with me something because he knew I was a believer. And he worked with people who left cults, as a matter of fact. And he mentioned how some of the women that he helped birth babies, and they didn't even know what happened to them. And but those babies, even when they were in the womb, would purposely cause trauma to the baby in the womb, so that the baby already in the womb would start developing multiple personality disorder, because it's a natural reaction to disassociate. So they would purposely scare the baby in the womb to already start prepping it for when it comes out to be part of this cult and be able to keep secrets so that it would never come out. So I think because of the complexity of what we've gone through, when Satan has grown in his ways. I mean, he always has the same tricks up his sleeve, but he's been working for so long that in the field of mental health, we've seen how this happens. And as a matter of fact, it gets me weary because up until today, some people still try to take off the diagnosis, the official diagnosis of dissociation or multiple personality disorder, off of the DSM, which is how we diagnose clients or people who are seeking clinical help. And it concerns me that it could be, especially nowadays, where there's a lot of kids because of drugs, like you mentioned, Dr. Bob, going into the foster care system, or people adopting them. And now we have them with a child that's reacting in a very strong, emotionally erratic manner. And if they happen to be believers, the first thing that runs through their mind is, could they be possessed? If they don't have a strong foundation in their faith, they could end up going to one of these crazy, shack churches around the corner to try to fix the problem. So what can we do, Dr. Bob, if we end up with, or if there's anyone in the audience that has a child that they don't know their background, like you said, and maybe the child is showing some kind of erratic behavior, and they already went with a psychiatrist, they already went with a counselor, and everything seems to be okay.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying that the child is acting out,
Correct.
but the psychiatrist can't find anything that seems abnormal
Correct.
in terms of psychological development?
Correct. And of course, mind you that a lot of people in the field, in the clinical field, are very hesitant to even diagnose a child under the age of 18 with any diagnosis, but they already kind of see. But what if this is a spiritual form? What can they do when they receive a child through foster care, or maybe grandparents that haven't really been in the life of those kids, but somehow or the other, the foster care system puts them in their care? What can they do spiritually to kind of start praying? How can they pray for them? Or what can they start doing in the spiritual to cover them to prevent demonic possession?
Well, one of the things I want to say, first of all, is that if they do think that there is something going on with this child, listen to the child, hear what they say, and watch very carefully how they describe their experiences, whether it's nightmares, whether it's visionary experiences, whether it's sounds. Children are very fanciful in the way they see the world, and sometimes it's a lot of make-believe, but sometimes it's not make-believe. Listen to the children, hear what they say, and ask God to show you if, in fact, what they're describing and what they're experiencing possibly fits into a template of possession. Now, from a preventive standpoint, obviously, a child should be baptized or dedicated or whatever the religious tradition is, but there should be something that ratifies the confirmation of the parents that they see the need for spiritual covering of the child, and they are going to take some kind of step to do that. Most evangelical churches have dedications. Catholics and liturgical churches are more accustomed to baptisms. Well, however you want to look at this theologically, the idea is a child needs to be brought to the church before the Lord for cleansing. And of course, in the Catholic ceremony, if it's done properly, and the Lutheran ceremony, if it's done properly, of infant baptism, there is a renunciation of the devil. The parents do that and speak on behalf of the child. So there is the principle, the parents speaking for the child, the power of declaring over a minor the will and purpose of the parents and of God. So that's the first thing. The parents need to tell the devil, this child belongs to us. We give this child to God, and we will care for this child in such a way as that you, Satan, will not be able to interfere in so many words, you know. And unfortunately, that tradition has been kicked out. I mean, the Church of England, about, I don't know, 8-10 years ago, did away with it because they thought it was too embarrassing to have parents renounce the works of the devil, which is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then also doing some curse breaking, just very gentle, but just prayers of curse breaking over the life that they had before and the spiritual heritage and their heritage, where when it comes down to maybe some issues in the bloodline, to come against those. And that doesn't really ever trouble a child, but to agree together, husband and wife, to agree for that child, to break any curses in Jesus' name and come strongly with authority to come against those curses that would try to land on those children. And I love Pastor Bob. He says, a demon doesn't go until it's told to go. And setting those parameters, setting those rules that God gives us, and the authority that God gives us is so important to protect that child.
Now, Sister Laura, in your book, where it says "Set Your Family Free,"
Yes.
you actually talk about how you and Dr. Bob, you had a special kind of like, I guess, like a rite of passage for your daughters before they became of age and left your home, if they're already gone. But you mentioned a lot, both you and Dr. Bob, about the certain age of accountability, that once they're 18, I guess they're basically more accountable by themselves. So, but you had a ceremony, you talk about a ceremony that you mentioned in this book, Set Your Family Free. Can you tell us just a little bit about what you did in regards with your daughters, about that ceremony that you did with them to protect them or break any kind of demonic bondage in their life?
Well, it was really an exciting time. And it's also, it's a bittersweet time because they're becoming an adult at the age of accountability, or 18. And we would be very serious about that time and have a special time set aside with our children to pray over everything that we could possibly think of, break every curse, break everything we knew in our family that could have been a spiritual weakness, to fortify them as they went off as an adult and they were accountable now to the Lord, and to understand the weight of that and how important that is to be an adult, to make those choices, because otherwise parents can be praying for their children, and those prayers have such weight and such effect on them. But once they're 18, it is their relationship with the Lord and their prayers that hold the ultimate authority, and their will. They make choices. So it was so important.
The thing that we've encouraged, our tradition has been to do it the night before. We take advantage of the last possible moment to speak for them as parents. And as she has said, we make it very plain. Okay, when you get up tomorrow, your junk in your trunk is your problem. You're going to have to deal with it. Okay. You know, if there's anything going on,
Yeah,
you got to deal with it now. You can't run to mom and dad and say, well, pray for me and break this thing away from me, push this. No, you got to do it now. We certainly can pray for them, but
Oh, yes.
ultimate legal standing before man and God occurs at that time. It's a very crucial time. I've heard some wonderful testimonies of parents who have seen remarkable things happen when they enforce that. Now, the same thing is true with a child. When a child comes into the home, when the child is born, there should be what we call curse breaking and renunciation prayers over that child on behalf of the parents for known and unknown inherited evils. Now, hopefully, the parents are aware of these things and have already done it when they were in the womb or beforehand, but definitely they need to do it afterwards. Now, if we have people who are watching and listening and saying, well, wow, I've never done that. My kid's 25. Sorry. The devil's going to use that to his advantage. You pray for them, take this truth to them, and tell them they need to do it for themselves. But if they're not at the age of majority yet, then definitely take them aside and say, your mother and I are going to pray over you. Oh, Dad, no, we're going to pray. Oh, well, what? Well, there were some curses. Oh, well, remember Grandpa? The stories about him? Well, okay, we know what you're being like, Grandpa. So we're going to speak for you and say these prayers and ask you to agree with us. This is all very important.
And all hope is not lost. If you have a 25-year-old child, it's amazing how many people come to us with adult children, and they'll be asking questions about how they can break curses or break certain behaviors. And sometimes just prayer before you approach a child about the weightiness of having curses in their lives can be very powerful. So don't give up hope. I just pray that parents would be able to approach their children and they would be anointed and they would be able to speak to them and with that authority, so that those children who are now adults would make the choice, the volitional choice to say, no, I do not want those curses and I want to break them. And I want to break them off of not only myself, but future generations.
Amen.
I think it's important that we clarify and revisit where we started this conversation. I don't want people to get the wrong idea theologically that moral guilt lies on a child because of what somebody else has done. We're not talking about moral guilt here. We're talking about the infection of evil in the spiritual system of a person that isn't going to make them sin, but is going to have the tendency to push them in the wrong direction. That's what you want removed. And you should do that. But never, ever any kind of abusive behavior, intrusive behavior, it's all got to be done kindly and gently. Christ set the example. The Bible says there were the little children there. He gathered them to himself. He loved them. He knew some of those children for which he was chastising the apostles for sending them away were probably demonized, probably had stuff going on. So he was reaching out to them to heal them. And I can just see Jesus doing that. I cannot see Jesus beating a child black and blue to make the devil leave them alone.
Correct. Well, I mean, those are very good points. And it reminds me, this whole dilemma about children and what we're doing is, it reminds me from what Psalm 127 verse 1 says, and I want to quote it from the NASB. It says, unless the Lord builds a house, they who build it labor in vain. So we can have all the advice which is good, how to raise a good family, good advice about how to have a good a relationship in your marriage. All that is very good, important. But if you have everything together, your finances, even your spiritual life to a certain extent, but you do not break the curses. I have sadly seen that over and over again, how the kid or the child reaches, an age of accountability. They're in their 20s and they're gone from the home. And all of a sudden we see them nosedive, and we see the same repeated pattern of mental illness or a curse, in regards to an early death, drug abuse, etc., because the curse was not broken. They just thought going to church was going to suffice. And I remember one of the books, Demon Proof and Prayers. I hope and I encourage people to get it from your website, and we already give them the website. But Dr. Bob, if you can, we have about maybe 4 minutes left. If you can give us just a couple of words of power and counsel to people regarding their children and protecting them from demonic possession.
Satan is no respecter of persons. Satan is evil beyond anything that we can imagine. It's incomprehensible that anybody would treat a child in the way that Satan wants to treat a child. But he is always after the next generation. When I take people through deliverance and I have an exorcism, I'm casting out the demons. One of the things that I always have the demons say is this. I make the demon repeat it after me. I lift the curse from this man or woman and future generations. And a very common reaction at that point, the demon sort of goes along with, because he doesn't have a choice. Well, I break the curse on this woman and future generations. No. That's maybe you've seen that deliverance. Oh, immediately that demon just freaks out because they're like, oh, no. Anything but that. We want the future generation. And then they start wanting to make a deal with you. Well, we'll do this with that. Just give us the children. We'll leave this person. We'll go. We'll come out now. Just let us have the kids. It's always the next generation because they're malleable. They're tender. They're young. They're vulnerable. They're an easier target, easier to corrupt. So let's remember, it is always the progeny that the devil is after. He knows that when he's demonizing or harassing an adult, that adult has the ability and the independency to find help. See a therapist, see a counselor, see a pastor, priest, or somebody, but a child, they're dependent on the parent. They don't have the mobility. They don't have the ability to get that kind of help. So the parent is the protector of that child until they are of such an age that they can seek the help themselves. So speak for your children, declare for your children, and trust the Lord that if you've done those things, it's going to lodge in their hearts. And at the very least, the curses that might have brought them down are gone. They're still going to have struggles. They're still going to have their own moral decisions to make. They're going to have their own battles with evil and the right choices. But what a curse does, it weights the choice toward the bad instead of the good. The curse of a child doesn't make that child grow up to be bad. It makes it difficult for them to be good. So thank you very much for this time. A very interesting discussion. I don't know if I've actually spent this much time ever. I don't think we have ever sitting down and talking about this particular topic and analyzing it the way we have tonight. So I think it's a great thing that you're doing. Many blessings. And thank you so much for picking our brains and bringing this out into the open, Laura.
It's wonderful. We just so appreciate what you're doing and that you care so much about the children. It's so evident just to have asked about this and to explore it and pressed into it. So thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, we are very blessed. I have always said that I followed Bob Larson since I was a child. As an adult, I forced my wife to study with me in the School of Exorcism because I wanted to immerse her in the real thing. And I think if anybody is out there hearing this, any Bible school, church, or anyone that needs to get more information from Bob Larson Ministries, this is the real deal, as he calls his program, The Real Exorcist. Until next time, continue to join us here, Empowering Counsel with Pastor Sammy, so that together we will supernaturally continue to walk on water. Be blessed.